Hey everyone! So today we're going to be looking at the matte slider, and we're going to be going through the docs and getting it to work on our own blank site. If you don't know how to set up your own new project in Angular Material, be sure to check out my tutorial on Angular Material Basics. Alright, with that said, we're going to get this first example working on our site, matte slider. So the first thing to do is to go into the app module file and make sure you have browser animations module imported. And we're going to import matte slider module. Okay, and then we're going to go in the HTML file and paste in that matte slider. Alright, so refreshing the page. Here's our slider. We can drag it around. But actually the click and drag doesn't work. And that's because in the docs it says the sliding behavior only works if you have Hammer.js on the page. So what that means is if when you are setting your app up you forgot to do this gesture support step, you'll need to do that for the slider to work properly. So I'm going to do that in my app real fast. I'm going to go stop the server using Control-C, copy and paste that npm install Hammer.js, and then make sure to grab this import Hammer.js, and we're going to put it in the main.ts. And I'm just going to put it here. Okay, and with those two changes, we should see the sliding start working. So I'm going to rerun the server using ngserve. And I'm going to refresh the page. And there we go, beautiful. So the sliding is working properly now. Because before I had to click if I wanted it to actually move. Alright, so now that we have the sliding working, we're going to go back and look at the other stuff we can do with this. So basically by default it has the range 0 to 100, but we can modify that using the min and max values. So just so that we can see what our value is tied to, I'm going to assign ngModel to this. That's just going to be a variable in our TypeScript, and it's going to be tied to the value of the slider, 0 through 100. And I'm going to make that value visible here in a div below the slider. And then we also need to initialize that value in the TypeScript. Okay, so now that variable will be synchronized here and shown here. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. Alright, so we're getting this error, can't bind to ngModel because it's an unknown property of matte slider. And that just means that once again I forgot to import the forms module. You need that if you're binding to a model within any sort of form element, like an input or a text area or even a matte slider. So now that that's imported, we should see the value, and we do. So there's value 0, and then when we move this around and then release, it'll change the value. So like I said, it's 0 to 100. And then what we were doing before is we're looking at this min and max. So let's change those up. So we can change the min and max range for the matte slider. So min 1, max 5. Let's see if that changes it in our view. There we go, 1 to 5 actually. It started at 0 because I set it to 0 in the TypeScript. So that's kind of interesting. I guess to be consistent, you could probably set the value in the TypeScript to be 1. So I'll do that. Anyway, the next thing we can do is add the step. So the step variable is like the granularity. By default it's just 1. So like we can't choose a number that's not a whole number here. But if we wanted to, we could set it to 0.5, and then we'll be able to choose more precise values. So there we go, 3.5, 3. Okay, so that's the step. Alright, another option we have here is the orientation. By default it's horizontal, but you can just simply add this vertical attribute, and then it will be turned vertical. And it always starts from the bottom, unless you apply this invert property to it. So if we add that, it'll start from the top. There we go. So now 1 is at the top, and then 5 is at the bottom. Okay, and then the invert also works for horizontal matte sliders. So now we'll see it go right to left. So 1 is over here, 5 is over there. So now it's backwards. Okay, the next thing that we can do is use a thumb label, and that's basically this little thing down here. It's this little tack looking thing, or a thumb label as they call it, and that pretty much just displays the value inside this little bubble. So let's see what that looks like in our example. Alright, so for us it's kind of overlapping with the top a little bit, so I'm going to add a break tag before, maybe a couple of them, so we can see the result. Okay, there we go. So you can see the values just shown in this little thumbtack looking thing. It turns gray when it's at the beginning, and then it's colored anywhere after that. Alright, so another thing you can do is change the way which the thumb label displays your value. So like in this case they have 33K instead of displaying the whole number. And that feature is only available in the 6.0.1 version of Angular Material. But I'm not on that version right now. I'm on the older one, the 5.2.4, so we're not going to be able to demo that one just yet. But it's pretty simple. You just provide a display with attribute and tell it what function you want to call when you want to display the value. And in their case that's format label, and they just grab the number, the value of the input, and then if it's null or 0, it just returns 0. So that'll display, or it would display 0 here if it were 0, but it only goes to 1. And then if the value is greater than 1,000, then it just displays the number divided by 1,000 rounded, and then puts a k after it, so they're displaying the number in thousands. And then otherwise, like when it's really small numbers, they just display the literal number, so that's why we see 1 here, or even like 705. Yeah, so that's the slider label formatting. It's pretty useful, but again we're not going to be able to demo it here. Next thing you can do is use tick marks, which are shown marks on the slider. And the way you do that is you provide a tick interval, and what the tick interval is the number of steps in between each tick. Alright, so since our step interval is 0.5, if we say the tick interval is 2, then we should see ticks every 1, because 2 times 0.5 is 1. So every value we'll see a tick. Okay, so we see a tick at 2, and at 3, and at 4, and at 5. And there are always ticks on the ends, no matter what you do. So you can also set the tick interval to auto, which basically makes sure that there's at least 30 pixels of space between ticks. That's basically it for sliders, you guys. Let me know if you like this video in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more videos like this.